All right, so I'm gonna just cover a little more detail about the Herod the Great. As I mentioned about the Herod the Great is very important characters in the Bible, and he was ruling the area somewhere between BC 40 to BC 4. So he passed away um, in BC 4, so we can tell um, Jesus was born in the BC area, not in the AD 0 or AD 1. So, um, so just to keep that in mind. Uh, Herod was born as a second son of Antipas, Herod Antipas II. And when he uh, was at 25, his father, which is Herod Antipas II, appointed him as the governor of Galilee when he was 25 years old. He gained recognitions and his reputations from Rome because he literally executing the some troubling the rebels in the area, which was a problem for the Romans, and um, he was able to kind of calm them down. That brought up some of the angers from Sanhedrin, which we know, and he earned the support from the Galilean Jews because he was able to suppress a lot of the rebels around the area. And later on, he was successfully repelled, Antigonus of the Hasmoneans dynasty when he invaded into the Galilee area, which he kind of calmed them down. After his father Antipas was assassinated, his father was assassinated, and Romans, the region's Mark Antony. You know now who Mark Antony is based on story that I gave you last week. You remember the after death of Caesar, right? How the power was split into two parts, right? Mark Antony and his adopted sons, right? So, but at first, Mark Antony was gaining the powers, and he was exercising the powers at the time because he was the right hand man of Caesar's, and he had the most um, the military powers. Um, so what he did was Antipas, his father, which is the Herod the Great, and Herod knew who has the power and who they need to go to receive the authorities to govern this area. So when you think about it, the Herod Antipas and Herod the Great, even though we know him as the villains and he was a bad guy from the Bible perspective, but they were very, very good politicians. They knew where to go, how to actually play the political games to gain the authority and the power. So the first, he actually went to Mark Antony because Mark Antony has the most power at the time. And while he was actually just the kind of getting the support from the Mark Antony, he was appointed as the tetrarch of the Judea. Um, the the there was uh, what you call what is the word that I'm looking for? Uh, when the Mark Antony assigned the Herod as the governor of that Judea area, he kind of split those power between the Herod and his brother Phasael. Phasael was the brothers of Herod, and they were kind of like split into two different areas. They were kind of like competing each other. And later on, the Phasael was captured by the Parthians, and the who supported the Antigonus as the king. Antigonus as the Hasmoneans, rebellions from the Hasmonean dynasty. Because Phasael supported the Antigonus as the king, and he was actually captured as a Parthians, and later on he actually committed a suicide. Well, when he was captured, and when this actually happened, Herod fled to Rome. And when he was staying at the Rome, he played the political game as he was good at it in maneuverings and successfully secure the appointments from the Rome to really just govern that area by himself. That happened in BC 38. And literally the Roman forces just came into the Judea to drive those Parthians out of that regions and secured Herod as the ruler of those Judea area. And Antigonus from the Hasmonean dynasty, he claimed as the king at the time, but Romans just literally moved him from that area and put Herod as in charge of it. When Herod actually came as ruler of that Judea area, he just kind of maintained a very peaceful relationship with the Jews. And he was trying to just be mindful of how the Jewish sensibility as well as the their politics, and he also tried to just maintain good relationship at the Rome, because if he does not maintain the good relationship with the Romans, obviously his power could be taken away. So he was playing very political gestures between the Jewish community, as well as the Romans, the politicians. But later on, after Octavians and Mark Antony, they were fighting each other to truly take over the powers of the Rome. And as I told you about last week, when Mark Antony was defeated, and then when he actually suicide, right, and Octavians took over the power from Mark Antony. And now Herod has to really he was actually just keeping the good relationship with the Mark Antony, and he was a sort of like playing a lot of the supporting roles for the Mark Antony. But now Mark Antony was defeated by Octavians, and now what he has to do is he has to really just shift his political gestures to Augustus Octavians, because now he supported Octavian's opponents, right? So Octavians would not like him. But now he just kind of quickly switched to Octavians and I say, hey, by the way, I wasn't really supporting, Mark. I had to support him because he was in charge and I had no choice. So he was literally just, switching the gears to the Octavians, and he was really, really good at it. And you could imagine, because of his talents in political postures, Augustus Octavians also accepted Herod. So it is not easy for you to just switching gears from supporting, one political power over to the other political power. It's not easy, right? But he was actually able to do that, and because he was very, very talented and he was a good speaker, and during his the reign, and he expanded his territory in Judea borders. And culturally, he really cultivated, and he wanted to just to keep the Greek Hellenism, and he wanted to build magnificent, buildings and architectures. This is why I mentioned many times before that when we actually go to Israel, a lot of the beautiful architectures and the buildings that you see in Israel are actually built during that during his time, because he was the one who wanted to build those architectures and buildings. Um, his capabilities and achievements is uh, is unparalleled to any of the rulers at the time, because he was really committed and he wanted to really make the Judea and Israel as the area where he actually just to kind of like cultivates and make it innovative, and wanted to make a good cities. Um, so he built a lot of the architectures, including the temples. His accomplishment was so significant, and uh, the a lot of the people really liked what he did, truly, and he really re-innovated the cities and rebuilt a lot of the fortresses and uh, Caesarea areas. Um, he did a lot of stuff when he actually built a lot of the buildings, but he actually adapted a lot of the Greek styles, because he really just um, liked the Greek styles of the architecture. Even today, a lot of the theaters and aqueduct built by the Herod remains preserved in Israel, and especially in the Caesarea, uh, um, the architectures along the coast area. That those are all the things that he has built. Even though he actually achieved a lot and rebuilt the cities, the Jews were not really pleased with him. Um, so Herod wanted to just buy Jewish communities and leaders and the peoples of the cities. What he did was, if I can actually just rebuild a temple, they will like me. So literally, he put a lot of his private money to rebuild the temple, the Jerusalem temples that we know today. Only remaining of those temples are the Wailing Walls that we know today. But that's the temple side that he actually built. Rebuilding of the second temples started around BC 20. And during the time of Jesus, temple was still in constructions. And finally, when the completions of the temple was finished, that was AD 64. So you could imagine Herod the Great started to rebuild the temples in BC 20 and then finished in AD 64. How long did it take?
44 years?
No. He started in BC 20 and finished in 64, so it took 84 years. So
Okay.
BC is, it's like you can think of as minus 20, right? AD is plus 64, right? So if you add those, it will be 84 years to really just rebuild the temple. So you could imagine how long it took to rebuild the entire the temple side. And remember, I told you that Herod the Great passed away in BC 4, which means his sons literally took over the work that Herod the Great started, and they continued on to rebuilding those temple side. It was really, really big projects, and it spanned across the 84 years. And Herod's temple project was a massive, and it's Herod the Great had the master plan of how he wanted to build. That's how he was just, to committed to really make this temple side really great. And literally, he dug up 45 meters deep from the ground. Can you imagine at the time? It's not like you have like machineries or the construction gears to really dig into the to area. So he dug up the 45 meters of deep, and the area he was actually just dig in is almost about the 480 by 300 meters wide. So you could imagine how long it took for them to really dig into that big of an area to rebuild the temples. But after the temple was finished, renovated in AD 64, what happened was 6 years later, Rome destroyed that temples in AD 70. So it took 84 years to rebuild the temple, and then only stayed there for 6 years and was destroyed. You could imagine how disappointed for the Jewish people were, because it only stayed after finished the project. It only stayed there for 6 years. And as you know, even Jesus' disciples marveled at the gesture of the temple, right? And they said, "Well, look at this, like a temple. This is a great temple." And Jesus obviously mentioned that, well, soon there's nothing will be left in this temple side, right? This is exactly what he said in Mark chapter 13. So let's just take a look at what Jesus said in Mark chapter 13. Let's go to Mark chapter 13, verse 1. It says, "And as he became out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, 'Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings.' And Jesus said to him, 'Do you see these great buildings? There will be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down.'" So you could imagine they were so proud of actually building the temples and the constructions they have seen, the master projects that Herod started. So they were very proud of seeing and temples being rebuilt and nicely. But Jesus' response to a disciple is, yeah, the building is great, but it's not going to be actually destroyed very soon. This is one of the things that I actually realized when I actually went to Europe for the first time. I visited a lot of the beautiful, antiquated the churches that's been there for thousands of years. When you actually just go into that kind of a churches, you will be totally, totally amazed with the architectures and how it was built at that time. It's just amazingly beautiful. Have you ever been to I'm trying to remember the name of the church in France that was burnt down. What is it? Notre Dame. Have you ever been to a Notre Dame, the church? When you actually just walk in there, you literally say like, "Oh my God, this is like so enormous and beautiful, and it's beautifully architectured. I have not actually been to that Notre Dame after they finished. Right, they finished the last year, and when you actually, I've seen the pictures and how it changed from the time that I visited there. It's now a completely different building now. But anyway, when you walk in, you will be totally amazed. And if you go to Rome in Vatican's, there Vatican's the churches are beautiful. When you actually look at some of the architectures and the statues made by the marbles and the way they actually just carved out those statues, amazing. I was so shocked at how beautiful, because I've never seen those kind of the churches before. But I was actually thinking, wow, I wish I could actually come to church every Sunday like this, because it's so beautiful. But you know what? It's almost the same feelings for the Jews at the time when they walk into the temple side. They were like amazed by the architecture, amazed by how it was built. So they were take the pride of how the Herod was built at the temple side. They were feeling exactly the same thing. Even though Herod was politically very talented and he knew how to play the political games, but he was one of the cruel rulers, especially for his family's members, and to his close associates. He had a great jealousies, and he hated anybody to really taking over the power that he actually had. So his intention was driven by the jealousy, and he had lots of suspicions, and he had a lot of desire to keep the power. So you could imagine when those Magi came to Herod and say, "Well, where is the King of Jews were born?" You could imagine what triggered Herod to really kill the babies under 2 years old, because anybody, including his family members, or any associates, or any the people close to Herod, anybody's trying to take his power away, he would not hesitate to really kill those people. And he was very insecure in his position, because he was always worried about anybody who's coming and take away his power. And he was one of the reasons why he was actually so anxious was because, as I mentioned many times, Herod is not a Jewish. He's not an Israelite. He was Edomanians. Edomanian means that he was the descendants of Edom, so Esau, right? So he was not a Jew. But how he became actually the Jews is because the Hasmoneans invaded into the Edom, and then forcefully converted all the Edomanians into Jewish by to having that circumcision. So they were forced to receive the circumcision to convert into Jews. So they're not truly Israelites or the Jews by blood, but they were actually converted to Jews. So because the Edomanians were converted to Jews, obviously they were not truly accepted by the Jews, because they're not, Jewish by blood. And this was done during the time of the John, the Hyrcanus, by the Hasmonean dynasties, And since he's the one who actually forcefully converted the Edomanians into Jews, obviously they needed the reason to claim that I'm a Jew. And because the John Hyrcanus is the one who actually forced the Edomanians to convert to a Jewish back in 125 BCs. Later on, the Hasmonean dynasty ultimately paid by that big price what he had done. And that's exactly what happened to Herod. And Herod is the one who actually persecuted and destroyed the Hasmonean dynasty. And Herod was always burdened by the fact that, he was the ruling kings of the Jews while he was not a true Jews. And to really strengthen his positions, he married to Miriams from the Hasmonean dynasties. Remember last week I mentioned about we're going to talk about one of his wife, the Miriam was a very important person, and this is the person because Miriam was the last person from the Hasmonean dynasty, and since the Herod wanted to secure his positions and want to be acknowledged by the Jewish community, they said, well, I married to the Hasmonean dynasty woman. Now you accept me as a Jew. So that was the whole reason why he actually married to the Miriam. And even though he was married to the Hasmonean dynasty, when you look at the history of the Hasmonean dynasty, they not only actually ruled, but also they had the ownership as the priest, high priest. One thing you have to remember by the Moses law, who can be priest?
Levites?
Yes, there have to be Levites, but any Levites can be a priest?
You have to be descendants of Aaron.
Exactly. You have to be the descendants of Aaron to become a priest or the high priest. If you're not descendants of Aaron, you cannot become a priest. But when Hasmonean took the roles of the ruling the Jewish community, they themselves became a high priest. They played the role as high priest. So there was a lot of the rebels and a lot of the rejection from the Jews, because how can you be the priest and high priest if you're not the descendants of Aaron? But they have been playing that role for quite some time when the Hasmonean dynasty was ruling in the area. And they kept the power. So Herod did not like the idea that Hasmonean family still occupying the position as the high priest. And that threatens his positions. So he was had a fear of Hasmonean dynasties, even though they were destroyed. And so what he did was he appointed Hanael, which is not the person from the Hasmonean dynasty, who came from Babylon as a high priest. That brought up the big tension between the Hasmonean families. So let me just show you this diagram, which I shared with you last time. You see my diagram? So, as you can see from this chart, the Herod the Great is right here, right? And the people right here, Doris, Miriam first, Miriam second, Almarthais, and Cleopatra of Jerusalem, those are the Herod's wife. Okay? So out of all this wife, important person they have to keep in mind is the Miriam the first. She is the last person from the Hasmonean family. All right? So when Herod and the Miriam married to, when Herod the Great is married to the Miriam the first, obviously it actually, secured the position of the Herod that, well, I married to the Hasmonean dynasties and their families, so the Jewish people have to acknowledge it. So the Miriam the first mother, her name is Alexandra. Alexandra was a sort of like, she was the mastermind of all this, and then she was a kind of manipulating the Miriam the first and Herod the Great to secure their positions and secure the power of the Hasmonean dynasty. So what Alexandra wanted to do was, she was actually trying to secure Aristobulus, which is Miriam's the first and the Herod's Great. Out of those two, there are two sons, Alexander and Aristobulus. So Alexandra wanted to make the Aristobulus as the high priest to secure their power of the dynasty, Hasmonean family power. And when Herod made the Hananel as high priest instead of Aristobulus, Alexandra was so mad, and she was extremely displeased with the gestures that Herod the Great had done to appoint the Hananel as the high priest. And he showed very much of a dissatisfaction with the decisions that Herod made. Alexandra wanted to make this Aristobulus, which is Herod's son, as a high priest, but that didn't work out. So what happened was Alexandra secretly contacted Cleopatra of Egypt. Cleopatra that we know, which we talked about, right? At the time, as I mentioned, Cleopatra was in love with Mark Antony. Mark Antony was the one who actually had the power, right? So, by contacting Alexandra contacting Cleopatra, Alexandra was manipulating the Cleopatra to really just, change the decisions that Herod made by forcing her or using her, the Queen Cleopatra, to influence Mark Antony to push the Herod to change his decision. So after Alexandra kind of whispered into Cleopatra's ears about the story, Herod was assumed by Antony. And as a result, Hananel, who became a high priest that Herod the Great appointed, Hananel was dismissed as high priest and made Aristobulus was appointed as a high priest. Imagine how Herod felt in this situation. Obviously, Herod was very, very upset, and it was the victory of Alexandra. And Herod found out this is all plotted by the Alexandra. But I told you before, Herod is a very political person. So Herod did not want to really just to destroy the relationship with the Mark Antony. So at first, Herod actually played the games and just to keep the peaceful relationship Alexandra, and just to keep it as nothing has happened. And since the Herod found out that Alexandra was communicated at Cleopatra, and that's how every decision was actually came on. So what Herod did was he told Alexandra under surveillance that you cannot leave Jerusalem. You can go anywhere in Jerusalem, but you cannot go outside of Jerusalem. So he put restrictions over Alexandra. Alexandra, if she cannot leave Jerusalem, she cannot go to Egypt to talk to Cleopatra. So Alexandra once tried to escape to Jerusalem in a coffin. She actually got into the coffin to try to carry out the coffin out of Jerusalem, and that was caught by the Herod. And Herod caught her that she was trying to escape out of the Jerusalem, and obviously now the Herod found out that she's trying to get out of the Jerusalem. Herod put a much stricter the surveillance, and she could not really just leave the Jerusalem. And he actually kept their Alexandra in Jerusalem, and at the same time, Herod eventually drowned Aristobulus to death. So he killed Aristobulus. Who is Aristobulus? Aristobulus is his son. But he wouldn't mind to kill his son. Anybody who is threatening his power, he would not mind to killing it. So he actually killed his own sons, Aristobulus, because he became a high priest. And he killed Aristobulus, but at the same time, he pretended he was so sad and he grieved and deeply for the death of Aristobulus, to show to the people how sad he was, even though he's the one who actually killed the Aristobulus. So you could imagine how Herod was at the time. And after Aristobulus was killed, Alexandra, which is Miriam the First's mother, wrote a letter to Cleopatra because she could not get out of Jerusalem, requesting to bring the Herod to a judgment. Once again, Cleopatra received a letter from Alexandra, and once again, he was summoned by Antony again for the second time. And before he was actually summoned, Herod instructed his uncle, Joseph, he's just saying that if I don't come back after I called into Antony, called as a state of affair, and then if I don't come back, kill the Miriam, his wife, Miriam the First, kill her. He did not want to have anyone from the Hasmonean dynasty to take over his power. So Joseph agreed. Okay, I will do that. So he departed to Egypt because Antony called him into Egypt. And after he left to Egypt, there was a rumor spread that Herod has been killed. And when this rumor was around, so Alexandra hear the rumors, and he was so happy that Herod was killed. So she started to really just regaining the power to bring the control back into the Hasmonean dynasty, and then claim that Jews is under the control of the Hasmonean dynasty. So Herod, instead of calling into a state of affair to kill the Miriam, Joseph tried to just kind of, join with the Miriam and told Alexandra, and Miriam told them Herod actually told him to call the state of affair when he doesn't come back and kill the Miriam. He revealed the message to Alexandra and the Miriam, and you could imagine how Miriam the First and Alexandra was upset by hearing that news. So Alexandra was a plan to really just restoring the power back into the Hasmonean the family. But while she was playing all these roles, Herod suddenly returned to Galilee, and the news and the rumor was spread by the Herod. He intentionally spread the fake news to see how they are doing, and then they literally play the way Herod wanted it. So what happened was, when he returned, instead of he lost the power, I told you that he was a good speaker. He actually spoke to Anthony to receive the greater power, which was a completely opposite than what Alexandra wanted it. When he returned, he now actually became more powerful than ever before. So then what happened? So Herod started investigations. What happened when I left for Egypt? And after he returned, he executed his uncle Joseph. Killed him. His uncle was killed because Joseph did not listen to what Herod said and revealed all the secret conversation he had with his uncle. So the first thing he did was killed his uncle Joseph and put his wife, Miriam the First, into imprisoned. And Miriam confronted to Herod, right? And told Herod that you had this engagement with your uncles to try to kill me. And she was trying to confront with Herod. Obviously, Herod did not care what she has to say. So Herod put his wife Miriam the First and Alexandra as a traitor and put both of them in prison. In the meantime, in Rome, there was a power struggle between Anthony and Octavians. So Anthony did not have any. He did not have any the luxury to even thinking about what is happening in Herod's world or in small world of Israel. He didn't really care because he was so busy, fighting with the Octavians. And after Anthony was defeated by at the Battle of Actium, and Rome was literally gone under the power of Octavians, opportunist Herod, which is the great politicians, quickly just went to Octavian and said, Herod, me as a Herod, the ruler of the Galilee, I submit to you. I just, come under your authority, and, I will do anything for you. And literally, he received the same power from Octavians. So he was able to secure his power in Galilee. But when he returned back to Galilee, his suspicions and jealousies grew, worse and worse. And as I told you before, that was one of the reasons why the Magi came to Herod about the birth of Jesus Christ. He was just like, he would not hesitant to really just killing those the children's under 2 years old to secure his positions and secure his power. And obviously, almost as he was getting older, this his jealousy as well as his suspicions grew worse and worse. So he executed and killed many of his sons and the close partners and associates. Herod executed almost 45 major figures from Hasmonean dynasties, as well as the people around him. So, he killed two of his wife, his sons, and anybody who's actually coming from the Hasmonean blood. He literally killed them all. And anyone who's under the Miriam the First, they're all executed. However, as you can see here, luckily, Aristobulus was drowned and killed by Herod. His grandson survived. Right? You see this Miriam, then Chalcis and Agrippa first, and Aristobulus and Herodias. These children survived because before Herod killed all his grandchildren, he passed away. So they were able to really secure their life. You know, it's luckily for them not to be executed. And at the time, there was rumors going around, and it is safer to be Herod's pig than his sons. The reason this kind of the rumors going around is because in Greek word, I mean, not Greek word, the Hebrew words, the pig is Hughes, and sons are Huios. So it's very similar. So it's safer to be the Herod's a pig than his sons, because almost his sons are all killed. He wouldn't mind to killing his sons. And right before he was actually he died, he approved Archelaus right here, which is the sons of Malthias. We talked about last week. So he actually gave the Judea and Samaria to Archelaus, and also he actually gave a small portions to the Philip and Antipas. So let me see if I can actually find the territories that he actually broke down to. His sons. Let me see. I may have it or I may not have it. Okay, I have this. So let me share this. You see this map here?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of like, the regions who was ruling. So you'll see this, the purplish color right here, Galilee and Perea was actually governed by the Antipas. And this entire area right here, this southern part of this Israel, was managed by and ruled by Archelaus. Oops. And then this area, which is the upper part of the is sort of a Jordan area and Syria area, this was given to Philip's. And small portion was given to Salome, which is a very small portion right here and right here. And the rest of it is a Syrian province, the green color. So you can see that Herod was actually, given certain powers to his sons and daughters. And the story here is that he was concerned about his honor and his reputations. That he was worried that if he died, no Jew's gonna actually cry for his death. So what he did was, Herod ordered to execute a lot of the Jewish people at the Jericho stadiums when he died. Why? Because he wanted to have the Jewish people to cry when he died. That's how he was. So he actually he tried to just to kill a lot of the Jews on the day that he died to make the Jewish people cried. And Herod died on April 1st of BC 4. He died according to the historians, he was actually died in a complication of a cancers and some other disease that he was actually carried on. And even after his death, obviously he's a family and his sons took over the power of that area which I mentioned. So if I just talk about the Archelaus was the sons of Herod the Great, the Herod the Great, and between Marthias and the Herod the Great, and he was given the powers and ruling the area of Judea and Samaria. And when Joseph and Mary returned from Egypt, and he was literally just ruling that area, which we talked about in Matthew chapter 2 last week's. And Joseph, which is Jesus' father, heard that Archelaus was reigning. He was afraid to come back and to Judea. So he received the warning in his dream that not to go back. So he withdrew from Galilee and settled in Nazareth. This is why Jesus was raised in Nazareth area. Around BC 4, after the Herod's death, Archelaus is literally hesitated to ascend it as a king of that area because he didn't want to just become a king by himself without any approval from Rome. So Rome was a little bit sensitive who's going to be the ruler of that area. So Archelaus trying to just to win over the Jewish's heart and favor, even though he tried very hard, Jewish people or community was maintained the hostility of the Archelaus. And Archelaus trying to make a peace treaty with the Jewish community, but it didn't work. So he eventually forced into the Jewish communities and suppressed the Jewish riots. And during the Passover period, that actually just brought the angers of the Jewish peoples, and he shed many bloods in the temple side during the Passover. And obviously, in around the AD 4, he was also challenged by the Antipas, which is his brothers. The Antipas claimed that area that Archelaus was actually ruling was against the will of the Herod the Great, which is father. And obviously Archelaus was claimed that this was given to him because he modified the Herod's will, that as if it was given to Archelaus, even though the land was given to Antipas. And Archelaus actually went to Rome with his mother, Martha's, to Rome, and but Rome supported Antipas because, according to the conversations with the Herod and the Octavians, he was actually the land was given to Antipas, not the Archelaus. And while the Martha's, which his mother, was just working with the Archelaus to try to just to gain the power, but he passed away. She passed away during that kind of process, and obviously Archelaus' request was impending. And then Romans literally just kind of forced into a Jerusalem area to really suppress those the riots that they're having, and when the Roman soldiers came to Jerusalem to kind of like settle down those riots, Rome's literally just kind of like, he didn't want any of the Herod's family to be actually just given to any authority in that area, which is the Judea and Samaria area, until they're settled in. But later on, his brother Philip the First that came to Rome to support his step brothers Archelaus, and after the support from the Philip the First, Octavians gave the Judea to Archelaus, and then the remaining half of that land to give to Antipas and Philip's. And none was actually given the title as the king, but instead of king, they named it as tetrarch. That's why the Bible's actually recorded it as the tetrarch of that area instead of a king of Jews. This is one of the reasons why many of the Herod's family, when they heard where's the king of the Jews was born, then they were upset because they did not have the title of a king, but they were actually called as tetrarch. And I'm just going to go over the Antipas, and then we're going to wrap this up. And Antipas was one of the sons of the Herod as well. And he has the Samaritan wife, the Marthais. And during the Jesus' time, and he was the tetrarch of Galilee and Perea. So as you can see here, this purplish color, this is where he was actually ruling. Remember, where was Jesus was actually working on his ministry? Mostly in Galilee area, by the Sea of Galilee. So you could imagine, you'll see here, you see this Nazareth here, and you'll see the Capernaum and Tiberia. This is the area where Jesus actually worked the most. So this is the area where the Antipas was ruling in that area. So this is why you see many of the stories of Antipas was shown in the Bible, which is Mark chapter 6 and Matthew chapter 14. It mentions about his name because he was a sort of the rulers of that area. And Tiberia area, which is a Sea of Galilee area, was the very, very big cities in Galilee. And Antipas initially married to a princess of Nabates. But later, he actually seduced his brother Philip the First's wife, Herodias, and married to her. And this is why John was actually complaining about, his behaviors, and later he was executed by the Antipas. And when you actually look at the book of Mark, Herod Antipas, he was a sort of a very complicated characters. He has ambitions, but at the same time, he was feared of John, because John was recognized as the prophets of that time, and many of the Jewish people respected John the Baptist. So he wanted to keep the good relationship with John the Baptist, but because of his ambitions and because of his, his desire to really seduce the Herodias, he had no choice to really kill him. And that's the story that we read in the Bible. So it is important for us to remember there are many different Herods in the Bible. From Matthew through the book of Acts, we hear about many different Herods. So we kind of have to understand which Herod we're referencing. Sometimes we hear their name as Antipas or Agrippa the first, or Herod. Sometimes they just generalize as Herod, but there are many different Herods in the Bible. So it is not just the one Herod, but at least be able to really see which Herod the Bible is referencing. So I'm not going to go much details of other Agrippa first, Agrippa seconds, and some other Herods, but at least you have decent understanding of many different Herods and how they actually secure their powers, and what type of the roles that they played, in which area they were rulings, and who they were, and what happens, and story between their brothers and sisters, and so forth. You have a good understanding now. So at least when you read the story of the Herod, now you know exactly which Herod we're referencing. Okay? So, do you have any questions about Herod?